Officers were clearly out of their jurisdiction.
When lawful authority vanishes, but the system pretends it didn't, the Minneapolis incident. We are accustomed to stories that begin with an officer attempted to stop a driver, the driver refused to comply, the situation escalated, shots were fired. That framing feels intuitive because it assumes authority was present from the outset. But what happens when the authority was never lawfully there to begin with? That is the quiet inversion at the heart of the Minneapolis incident. The disappearance of the officer jurisdiction is not a technicality. It is the line that separates lawful arrest from unlawful seizure. When an ICE agent steps onto a Minneapolis street to confront a U.S. citizen over what appears to be a purely state-level matter, harassment, no federal nexus alleged, and possesses no warrant and no delegated state authority, something legally decisive occurs. The agent no longer has the power to detain or command obedience. At that moment, the badge no longer authorizes seizure. The commands no longer carry the force of law. The firearm no longer backs a lawful order. What remains is the appearance of authority, color of law, without its substance. Federal law, 18 U.S.C. Section 242, recognizes exactly this danger. Officials can deprive citizens of rights while cloaked in official trappings, even when acting outside their lawful jurisdiction. The strongest reading of the incident is therefore not resisting arrest or fleeing, but attempted unlawful seizure, kidnapping under color of law. Self-created danger, lethal geometry. Public discussion often jumps to the moment the vehicle moves. She drove toward the agent, yet the footage and accounts show the agent circling the car and then positioning himself in its only viable path of exit. He did not stumble into danger. He placed himself in it in order to block escape. In other words, he held himself hostage to her refusal to submit to an unlawful extraction. Any risk that followed was generated by his own positioning, not imported by the driver. The energy of the no. Because no federal crime provided a lawful basis for detention, the agent had no legitimate subject to control. The confrontation therefore drew its intensity from something else. Her refusal. Her no. That refusal is not criminal defiance, it is the exercise of a right. Yet the response was escalation to physical extraction and ultimately deadly force. Section 242 exists precisely for such willful overrides of constitutional rights under color of law. The vehicle, escape, not weapon. A car is inherently dangerous and courts treat its use with gravity. But context determines meaning. When a person faces unlawful physical removal from their vehicle, the car becomes the only barrier and the only realistic means of escape. Movement in that direction is withdrawal from violation, not aggression directed at a person. The attempted murder framing and its limits. Attempted murder requires specific intent to kill. Intent cannot be reliably inferred from risk alone, especially when the risk is incidental to flight from an ongoing rights violation and when no safe alternative exists. If homicidal intent had been present, the outcome would likely have been far graver. The fact that the agent was clipped or had to jump aside is consistent with a trajectory aimed at an exit, not at a human target. Two competing narratives, common-public narrative. Jurisdictional-legal reality officer felt threatened, used force. Officer created the threat by acting without authority. Driver used vehicle as a deadly weapon. Driver used vehicle to escape unlawful seizure. Driver was a fleeing suspect. Driver was escaping an attempted unlawful extraction. Resistance justified deadly response. Deadly response enforced a non-existent authority. The real question the law asks, dangerous situations can arise in an instant. But the law does not permit us to begin the analysis at the instant of greatest drama. It requires us to ask, who initiated the rights violation that made danger inevitable? When that question is answered honestly, the usual framing shifts, not toward blanket absolution or condemnation, but toward accuracy. And accuracy is what separates justice from institutional reflex. Recognizing that a citizen's no to unauthorized power is constitutionally protected does not undermine law enforcement. It protects all of us from the far greater danger, state power exercised where the law has not granted it.